inquiry into nuclear power generation in Australia. I now welcome Dr. Barry Green to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Barry Green, and I'm here as a private citizen,
Thank you
but with a background in nuclear. So,
thank you. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Before I invite you to make an opening statement and then we proceed to discussions, would you please state if you're a current or former member of a political party or a union or an investor in the renewable or nuclear industries, please?
no, no and no.
Thank you very much. I now invite you to make an opening statement.
Okay. Now, I'll start off through why nuclear energy. The increasing electricity demand due to population increase and electrifying everything requires great power production capacity. No single energy source can provide this, but nuclear will be an essential element of any national system, as clearly understood by the other members of the G20 group, but not yet by our government. Now, the advantages for Australia, I've listed them. Nuclear is the most energy dense, as has been stated before. It's over 1 million times more dense than chemical reactions, fossil fuels. And so the land usage per electrical output is the smallest. And this issue of large collection areas required for solar, wind and wave and the unique requirements for pumped hydro should not be forgotten. The electricity distribution grid requires frequency stabilisation. So with a large number of renewables, it's massively complex and prone to failure, as we've seen. Nuclear power would provide frequency stabilisation of the electricity distribution grid while providing reliable baseload power. Baseload power, not power as a backup. Australia possesses a third of the world's cheap uranium fuel for the fission reactors. Australia possesses large deposits of minerals which will be required both for fission and fusion nuclear reactors, vanadium for high temperature, low activation steel, lithium and tungsten for fusion reactors. With the introduction of nuclear submarines for the Australian Navy, there exist far greater job opportunities for nuclear engineers than before. While primarily these jobs will be submarine reactor-oriented, many engineers will be required for remote maintenance and handling of radioactive waste. All these skills will be transferable, of course, to land-based reactors. Now, this is a point that I've heard a bit about this morning. Australia already possesses a small but highly competent nuclear workforce. ANSTO, APANSA and Safeguards, Academe, physics departments and nuclear engineering course at University of New South Wales, and members of the Australian ITER Forum, of which I'm a member, and which has made a submission, of course, to this inquiry from ANU. Thus, the training and advice for building a nuclear industry has a non-negligible basis. Of course, increased training will be necessary, and this will be a positive in making Australia a clever country. There is an appetite in Australia for developing educational opportunities in nuclear-related areas in the educational space. This will not only benefit domestic students, but could contribute to our world-class international student education system. Government-supported Australian scientists have been contributing to nuclear fusion research for several decades. At some point in the future, nuclear fusion will become both a viable and cost-competitive power source. If Australia is to take agile advantage of this revolution by rapidly developing a nuclear fusion power industry, will require nuclear engineers and scientists. Developing a nuclear fission power industry now is the only way of ensuring we have appropriately skilled workforce in place when commercial fusion power becomes a reality. Now, there have been some concerns usually raised about the introduction of nuclear power, and there are three of them: safety, cost and time, and I'll try and go over those very briefly. The nuclear industry is the most regulated industry in the world. Safety regulations are stringent, and noticeable nuclear incidents, e.g. Chernobyl, are the results of human failing or to follow procedure. Where design improvements can be made, inherent safety to obviate the need of emergency active cooling, they are being made in the design of new reactors, Generation 4 and small modular reactors, which I should point out, Russia and China already have built. And there is one approved in the States, and of course AUKUS, or the nuclear submarines, those reactors that are in them have worked well for years, are small modular reactors. So I don't understand the business about small modular reactors as something on the horizon. They're here. Regulations on the operation of nuclear reactors exist, and support design and operation is given by the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, of which Australia is a member. ITER, the large international fusion reactor experiment being built in the south of France, has been licensed to operate as a nuclear facility. So nuclear legislation or legislation to operate nuclear plant exists. With regards to concern about geological stability and siting of nuclear power plants and waste repositories compared to other countries, Australia has a very low seismic activity, as noted by the Commission, Nuclear Fuel Royal Commission in 2016. Commission reports also states, and I won't go into that, the Fukushima accident resulted not from damage to the reactors that were designed to withstand seismic activity and which automatically shut down at the time of the earthquake, but due to damage to the backup power systems as a result of the subsequent tsunami. Clearly, prudent design and siting of future reactors in Australia would eliminate this risk. The fact we heard recently that nuclear industry is in decline, I would dispute that. Clearly, with 439 nuclear fission reactors operating safely worldwide, including nuclear reactor at Lucas Heights in Australia, the safe operation of future reactors can be taken as a given. Now, cost. Much depends on the choice made, whether it's SMRs compared to large units or first of a kind compared to one of a series. The attraction for private investment will depend on the legislative settings at present hostile to nuclear. As with any power generation industry, such as offshore wind generation, serious production of nuclear power units will reduce the cost. The initial cost will cost the most, and then prices will reduce. Of course, the assessment of costs is a highly contentious issue, but this is a long-term investment for Australia to ensure the reliable source of power for the foreseeable future. Because a lot has been said about gen cost and frontier reports and so on, I should just point out that had an economic argument been made for the Golden Pipeline, which we Western Australians love to talk about, it would probably never have been built. So you have to be very wary about economic arguments. It all depends on the assumptions. Many Western countries have had sporadic nuclear power building programs and now in the process of restarting and ramping up those programs as part of their climate change mitigation strategies. Countries such as South Korea, who have had a continuous building program, have the lowest cost per unit. Okay. Cost comparisons between renewables and nuclear will be skewed if the different lifespans of the two technologies are taken into account. This was the problem of giving it to CSIRO to evaluate. Nuclear power plants have a lifespan of 70 to 100 years, which is with consistent power output across that time, and hence the initial capital cost is offset by a very long operational life. By contrast, renewable systems have a lifespan of at most 30 years, with declining performance over that span. Assuming that nuclear plants have the same lifespan as a renewable system incorrectly biases the costings in favour of renewables. It is vital for public trust in institutions that the information being used in the political debate is correct. Offsetting the cost of developing a nuclear industry in Australia, there are economic and societal benefits, such as an industry that go beyond the generation of frequency stabilised cheap baseload power. Firstly, it has long been an aspiration of governments of all major persuasions that Australia should become a clever country. increasing the skill level and STEM engagement with its workforce. Having a nuclear industry in Australia is a surefire way of moving in this direction. Secondly, not only would a nuclear power generation industry be established, but along with that, there would be a raft of support industries that would grow with it, increasing economic growth and activities. Hence, cost should not be the single consideration in whether we commence with nuclear power now. Nor should we be solely focused on the somewhat arbitrary deadline of 2050, which is only 25 years in the future. We should be setting Australia up to have the most flexible, secure and advanced power generation system and workforce looking forward to the next 50 to 100 years. I won't go over the history of Jervis Bay, which was an opportunity missed. Now, time for implementation. Let me just go on to that briefly, and then I'll come to what I would recommend. With 439 nuclear fission reactors in operation and 66 under construction worldwide, there is considerable information available on how to implement a program and avoid time delays and associated cost overruns, experienced in some cases. China leads the world at present in the construction of nuclear capacity, and so there is an opportunity and geopolitical interest to learn from the experience there. Once again, as with minimising cost, it is essential to make appropriate choices of what to build and where. Building on existing power station sites, which is what the opposition proposes, would seem to offer the quickest choice with existing transmission connection to the electricity grid. Now, I've got 6 recommended actions which I would like to go through. The main hurdle to establishing an Australian nuclear industry could be overcome by the streamlining of legislation which is developed at federal and state level. A vast improvement would be for nuclear legislation to be at the federal level only, to remove the ban on construction and operation of nuclear reactors in Australia, to allow a proper discussion of the role of nuclear power and attract private investment. If supposed high cost of nuclear power is the only objection of the current government, then there is no reason why it could not remove the ban on the construction and operation of nuclear reactors and open it up to private investment. Number 2, ensure the defence requirements for nuclear knowledge and training is met by appropriate courses. If we really do get AUKUS, then we will need a workforce of appropriately nuclear literate people to man the subs and to maintain them. Ensure that information being used in the political debate is correct. Lines of responsibility must be appropriate and efficient in a project engineering sense. Number 4, ensure that ANSTO's participation in the Gen 4 International Forum is maintained and strengthened based on the excellent work already performed. There was some doubt as to this because the Minister's statement at a recent international meeting. It's absolutely essential that ANSTO be part of Gen 4. A national or state radioactive repository is urgently required to store radioactive waste. For example, hospital waste from Australia's extensive and beneficial use of nuclear medicine, which is at present stored at different locations with different sorts of levels of security around the country. This should not continue. Now, a serious plan, the last one, is a serious plan to introduce uranium enrichment to add considerable value to the export of yellow cake that we do at present. This is of geopolitical interest and an opportunity for Australia, as Russia is the largest supplier of enriched uranium to the USA for its fission reactors, but appears likely to stop this supply. It has. The present legislation on the mining and export of uranium needs urgent streamlining. So at present, if I understand it correctly, if you want to open up a uranium mine, you have to get an export licence from the federal government first. There endeth the lesson.
Thank you, Dr. Green. We will start off with Mr. Chester first on this one.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Green, for being here at such short notice. Clearly, you have a scientific mind. So, do you think there's some intellectual inconsistency in Australia today that there is bipartisan support for AUKUS, uranium exports, and nuclear medicine and the Lucas Heights facility?
I certainly do. I mean, the nuclear medicine, when I give lectures on energy and things nuclear, because that's my background, nuclear medicine comes out as a clear favourite. You know, everybody's had an MRI, everybody's had an iodine drink, or many people have, or have had radiation therapy and so on. I was very surprised that the present government approved AUKUS, but I understand that from a security point of view, that was a consideration. Now, if we go down the path of AUKUS, it is not consistent, in my opinion, not to put reactors on land. You'll have to maintain these subs, you'll have to deal with the radioactive waste of these subs, and that requires all the abilities that we would have for a land-based reactor program. So, yes, I see the inconsistencies.
Can I also ask you, Dr. Green, to perhaps expand on your thoughts regarding Australia's existing nuclear science community, what our existing capabilities like,
Yes.
and what the capacity is in terms of
Well,
the ability to upskill?
Yeah, ANSTO is a top-level nuclear organisation, and we have good relationships there. But ANSTO is hamstrung because the budget has been limited, and in particular, speaking with my fusion hat on, they had an agreement with the ITER fusion program, and the money for that was cut. So that doesn't help our international partnerships and so on. So it was also a bit of a shock to me when the government decided to get CSIRO with no nuclear expertise to do the costings on reactors. That would appear to me to be either independent or you would get nuclear specialists on it.
And your reference to, you know, governments of many generations seeking to become a clever country, can you reflect at all about the capacity to upskill, you know, young Australians if there was a bigger nuclear industry available to them to work in?
One of the problems was years ago when the uranium mining was allowed in Western Australia, the Engineers Australia, who were represented here, I believe, asked me to come up with a program for educating, because it was clear that if you mined uranium and you hoped to have a power industry based on fission reactors, you would need nuclear literate people. Now, at that stage, there was no nuclear engineering course in the country. The last nuclear engineering course had been at University of New South Wales and finished in 1985 under Baxter, who became Vice-Chancellor. And so we set about, there was a little subcommittee formed, and we talked, and eventually we found out University of New South Wales would set one up again, and there was a benefactor who wanted things done nuclear, and there's a little bit of history in there, but University of New South Wales have an engineering course. Now, of course, it's clear that if we go down the path of AUKUS, one of the problems was, of course, jobs. Students won't go and study something if they can't see a job at the end of the line. So for the first iteration of that course, some of the students popped out because they couldn't see any future in it, not in Australia. And I suggested that they go overseas, get some experience and come back when things were better, as I did. I was 40 years out of Australia. And but now it's totally different. If the government is really serious, I hope someone somewhere in Defence or someone is working out the educational program of the people we need.
Last question, Chair. Just in relation, Dr. Green, to your comments around it's vital that for public trust the information is correct. Do you want to reflect on that at all? I mean, what are you seeing in the debate at the moment?
Well, I mean, what I heard today was I wanted to put my hand up every now and again and say that's not quite correct and so on. But it is difficult. I mean, we talk about a debate. It's not usually a debate. It's usually somebody gives an opinion piece and then there are letters to the editor and so on. We need to, if we're really serious about things nuclear, then the people to talk to about it are the nuclear experts from ANSTO. Now the problem is there's the grey area when it gets into the political sphere, and that's where, you know, where it can get a slight twist.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Bennell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Green, for providing evidence today. You said in your opening statement about streamlining legislation and the need to put all of the nuclear policy discussion legislation at the federal level only. Now, I'm sure that you're aware that this is a constitutional issue where different powers are allocated to both the federal and state remits.
How sad.
So you're proposing that federal government intervene on a constitutional issue that would end up in court and then go nowhere?
No, I mean the nuclear power is prohibited in Australia principally by two pieces of federal legislation. So the very first thing is to get rid of these. The Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999, which was mentioned previously, and the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Act 1998. These laws effectively prevent the construction or operation of nuclear facilities or power generation, as well as facilities for the fabrication of nuclear fuel, uranium enrichment, and the reprocessing of nuclear waste. Now, I understand that individual states have introduced their own legislation, but it would be great if the federal government could see their way clear to getting rid of these anti-nuclear statements in there, or anti-nuclear legislation.
You can see that there's an issue, though, where a federal government starts to meddle in the state constitutional
No, but these
powers,
are federal laws. These are federal laws. Just get rid of them.
Right, so you're just proposing that just get rid of anything that gets in the road and just put it under federal.
If the worry is that nuclear power would be introduced somehow willy-nilly because these laws didn't exist, why don't we let the market react? You know, this is what I don't understand. If the argument is that it's too costly, it'll take too long, there's no return for a business investment, why have these laws in place if they don't actually serve a purpose?
Well, fair enough. I'll move on. I do want to go to some of your comments around AUKUS. Now, I do want to clarify a couple of things. It's a highly politicised topic. It was an agreement that was entered into under the previous government with bipartisan support from the current government. There is a fundamental difference between the types of reactors that are used in a nuclear submarine and what's proposed on land, though, isn't there?
No.
Okay.
Let me give you a bit of history.
Yep.
The way that civilian nuclear power started was Admiral Rickover at the end of the Second World War put little reactors into subs. So we had nuclear subs. And then somebody a little bit later down the line said, gee, they're working so really well, very reliable under conditions that weren't perhaps ideal. Let's put one on land and generate power. And that's how the nuclear industry started in the US. So we could do that
directly
today.
Referring to when you made your opening statement, though, you're directly referring to small modular reactors.
Yep.
And the ability to make them commercially viable.
Right.
So why haven't we been able to see one come to the market commercially in the OECD across the globe?
Because of legal and activist attempts to slow things down. I mean,
so you're saying that NuScale failed because
let me tell you, I've just got the latest physics today here from the US. Small modular reactors are being promoted. So to date, one design has been approved, Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So that's the first one in the States. But they've already been built in Russia and China.
I specifically asked about OECD countries.
Yeah.
And
but why? China is.
And I want to make clear, so the new scale reactor project over in the States, they walked away from that project after massive cost blowouts. You just said that that the reason why it hasn't come to commercial viability is due to activism and something else.
Law, what I used the word, I can't remember, there was a lawfare.
Right.
Yeah. Slow it down. Do what you can to slow it down. If you slow technical development down, of course the costs go up.
Okay.
As I'm certain all the activists here understand very well.
I didn't get the impression that that was the reason, but fair enough. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Ryan.
Thank you. So, Mr. Green, your proposal there, just to continue from what Mr. Burnell was asking about, was that the cost blowouts of nuclear installations internationally have been largely related to opposition from...
and poor project management.
Okay.
But I mean, the one thing I hope I made clear is that when you build a reactor, as the first of a kind is always going to be the most expensive. Now, France, of course, had the right idea. They built series. So they built series of reactors. So they didn't change. Now, one of the problems with the UK program was that every now and again, when they built the next one, somebody had a bright idea to improve it. Now, the moment you start messing with an engineering design, costs go up.
Yeah. So you agree with the proposition that first of a kind is generally more expensive than and ninth or tenth, and obviously we would be building a first of a kind were we to build a nuclear...
Well, no, what I would suggest is we don't build first of a kind. We take a serious production that already exists.
Okay, but it's not something that we've had experience in this country with engagement with in the past.
We haven't built a reactor. We had Argentina build the latest reactor at Lucas Heights.
Yeah, so
which is a scandal, a shame.
Right, but regardless, that's what's happened,
Yeah.
and you'd agree that there would be, given just the evidence that this committee has heard in recent weeks, it's not unlikely that there would be significant local opposition from groups to the process, which might well. So I'll just finish the question, which might well result in delays to the rollout of a energy. Nuclear.
Well, I heard the story from different people here about reducing the amount of time for which people have their right to say whatever they like. But, if you let that go on too long, you never get anywhere. You never built the house that Jack built, that Jack wanted to build. So you have to, and this is up for lawmakers, to see that that's done, so that the people who want to make their case against, I've been in this game reasonable amount of time. So whenever I come to these inquiries or debates on nuclear energy, I hear the same arguments against nuclear. So you'll forgive me a little bit, I hope, in which I'm a bit short about this, The thing is, it can be done right. But you need good people and you need the legal framework to do it and the safety requirements and so on. I was there on the fusion reactor when we generated the first fusion power, measurable fusion power. And we satisfied all these safety requirements. I was there at ITER when they got nuclear approval to operate. So, it can be done. It's an engineering, it's a technical thing.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much, Dr. Ryan, Dr. Green, for being here today. And just to confirm, following up from Dr. Ryan's comments, that the Coalition's policy is definitely only for Australia to be adopting next of a kind, not first of a kind. Probably a dry subject for many, but you're one of the first who have appeared before the committee talking about the importance of frequency stabilisation. I think it'd be just good for you to expand on that for the sake of the committee, to explain the importance of it and the role that an energy source like nuclear can play in contrast to a renewables dominant grid?
I have to admit, this is not my specialist field, but the way the grid is operated at present, because renewables can follow better than a fission reactor, is that nuclear power is no longer our base load. So it gets put in when it's can be, when there's no solar or there's no wind. And that's clearly the wrong way round to operate. I hope there's no one here from AML. But that's clearly the wrong way round to operate. When you looked at the, when I looked at the demands during the day, and they felt with the introduction of electric vehicles that would flatten at night. Usually the demand goes down, but with electric vehicles, everybody charging up their electrical vehicle, that would tend to flatten it out. And that's just ideal for nuclear power. Just leave it running the whole day, constant. And then the following is done by other things. So the stabilisation, I don't know, but we've already had cases in Australia of stabilisation failures. One of the problems, one of the mistakes we made in Australia, I believe the government made in their efforts to get people to put solar on their roof, was that they offered to buy the power back at a price that was greater than the price that the people paid for getting power from the distributor, which is just crazy. And so, of course, everybody wants to put power back to earn a bit of revenue. And that's renewable power. Somebody said that, our engineer friend over here said, that if you could get storage, large-scale commercial storage, renewables would be the answer to a maiden's prayer. That's true. The trouble is we don't have large-scale storage, commercial storage. We have batteries, so you would need enormous batteries to stay on for any length of time. Batteries won't do it.
Another area you've touched on, which others haven't so much, is the importance of the front end of the nuclear fuel cycle, in particular the opportunity for Australia at some point in the future to look at enrichment. Can you maybe expand on that, both in terms of the elements of the front end? Is it just enrichment? Is it also fabrication? Basically all the things that lead up to.
Well, once you enrich, you could make fuel.
The second question, yeah, sorry. As you expand on that, you mentioned the geostrategic rationale behind Australia coming in on that front end of the fuel cycle. If you could expand on that part, John.
Well, it's always appeared to me to be wrong that we're a very good country at digging stuff out of the ground and sending it offshore, and that's been wonderful for us. But, you know, if you actually enriched us, the yellow cake, that would add so much more value to it. Now, just at the moment, the Russians supply enriched uranium, slightly enriched uranium, to the Americans, and that has stopped. And here is a great opportunity. I don't know how long this will go for, but it looks like an opportunity that could be very good. It opens up a market to the states of somewhat enriched uranium. Enriching uranium is not a fabulously difficult thing technically. Iran can do it. We can do it.
And just to confirm,
Final question, Deputy Chair.
yeah, sure, Chair. So just to confirm, you're talking here about enriching for the purpose of nuclear power stations.
Sure.
You're not talking about enriching to high weapons grade.
No. No, we're a good member of Safeguards.
Yeah.
And we would be bound by those regulations. I mean, there's a safeguard set up in Canberra, and they make sure we are.
Thanks, Dr. Green.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Ms Mascarenhas.
Thank you for being here today, Dr. Green. One of the things that you were talking about before was about nuclear incidents and how there's a tendency for those incidents that have happened to be related to mistakes that people have made. And I'm also trying to get my head around some of the proposals that you've made. And as a proudly democratic country, obtaining a social licence to operate will be really important if this industry is to go ahead. And so the thing that I'm trying to get my head around is that you've proposed federally that we should get rid of the Nuclear Safety Act and also federal environmental legislation.
No, the legislation that specifically prevents the construction and operation of nuclear facilities.
Which referred to the Nuclear Safety Act.
Well, it's the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, yeah.
And what was the other act?
And the other one was the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Act 1998.
So the thing that I'm trying to get my head around is if you remove those legislative requirements, how does the social license to operate this be obtained?
Well, in France, what they did was they went in when they decided they would have their own nuclear reactors. They went into each village, each locality, and they said, what do you want? Do you want a high school? Do you want a library? Do you want a swimming pool? And so on. It was basically bribery. And now those villages or those towns where the nuclear reactors are located are happy because the jobs are all there. They've got their high school, they've got their libraries and so on. So, you know, bribery is a good thing. So
from your perspective, that's the way that...
Well, you look. It's a negotiation, yes, but you know you don't want to overblow it. It's if you want to do something in a locality, you have to clearly get agreement. You have to be a good neighbour.
And I would say that governments would not want to participate in bribery. The other question that I had for you was around uranium mining, and one of the things that we learned is that the Colin Barnett government removed some of the barriers, and there aren't legal impediments. And so, from your perspective, why do you think uranium mining has not taken off in WA?
Well, it's purely commercial.
So it's not commercial?
Well, no, it's purely commercial.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like the mining in Coolgardie. Why aren't the mines open in Coolgardie? The moment the gold price goes up, the mine's open.
So not commercial? And
yes, it's commercial. The moment the uranium price goes up and makes it interesting, they'll mine.
And do you think that West Australians really want to become an exporter of yellow cake?
Why not?
I think that's my final question.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mascarenas. I'll just ask a couple of quick questions and then we'll go to Mr. Kennedy. I just want to go back to how you said if we lift the bans federally, then the states don't matter.
No,
pretty much.
I didn't say that.
But that is okay. You may not have said that way, right? But we do have bans in Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland.
Yeah,
and it's legislated.
Yeah, I know.
Legislated in there. So, and I don't know whether you remember the COVID, right? And we're in the state right now that cut off the rest of Australia. So the states have got a fair bit of power, if you haven't noticed. So we can't actually tell them what to do. How do you expect us to be able to change that?
That's a very difficult question that I don't know. I am surprised that my own home state of Queensland doesn't do this. You know, Queensland and Western Australia are very similar in many respects. We mine a lot of stuff and so on. But the fact that they wouldn't allow uranium mining, there's a lot of uranium in Queensland.
Yep. So, and because I'm a nice chair, right, I'm just going to ask you this to see if you want to clarify the record. You said bribery is a good thing. Do you just want to clarify that?
Well, if you want to do something and there's a price on it, or the people are amenable to accepting something from you, yes, do it.
Okay, that wasn't exactly where I thought that was going to go, but Mr. Kennedy, we'll go to you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Green. Look, I'd just like to thank you for your testimony. It's fantastic, and I just think it's helpful to put on your record. It's put on the record how great it is to have someone of your capability in Australia. You were at the Princeton Plasma Physics Institute in the USA. You then went on to Brussels, Oxford, USA, Germany, UK, France, Japan, where you've worked on nuclear for 40 years. How well set up, given you've worked all over the world in this area, how well set up do you think Australia could be to develop this industry?
I mean, I was not unique in the sense that when I came out of University of Sydney with my PhD, there were two opportunities for me to work. One was ANSTO, was the Atomic Energy Commission at the time, and the other was academe. And because I figured that I needed to get a bit of overseas experience, I went overseas, and the usual thing about Australians was in those days that you go overseas and in a couple of years they'd offer you a good job and you'd come back. Well, they did, but I didn't. And there were many other Australians in the same spot. We are good at educating scientists. We have good scientists, and but you have to, they have to have something to work on, and so it's been quite difficult, certainly in the nuclear sphere, to retain our people. It's as simple as that. Yes. But the point I wanted to make was that it was, people say, well, it'll take a long time to build up a nuclear industry, and I'm not decrying that absolutely. Yes, it'll take time. It will take time. But we already have a basis. You scratch a couple of places and there are people there waiting just to, work on things.
One more question, Mr. Kennedy.
Okay, yeah, last one. You've worked on fusion power for a lot of your 40-year career. Obviously, that has no waste, and congratulations for being the lead engineer of the first significant man-made fusion power in the world. I think that's an amazing achievement. We have the lead engineer of that right in front of us. I think we should note that for the record as well. What's the prospects of fusion, in 50, 80 years? Is that possible?
Yeah, well, I mean,
just one other add, if I could.
Yeah.
If we don't have a nuclear fission industry, are we going to be in a position to take advantage if that...
No, I would think, we'll have an inquiry in about 50 years' time on whether we should introduce fusion, and we'll be ruining the day. I mean, Jarvis Bay, I've forgotten the date of Jarvis Bay, but 1970. Had we started down the track then and built a reactor then, we would have been, of course, in a far better position. I think we are possibly going to make the same mistake now if we don't get a move on. So, I think the settings are quite good. I don't believe the comments I heard about the popular rejection of nuclear. The people I speak to, maybe we're all cut from the same cloth, but I think that there people say give it a, why not? At least it should be in this, it should be talked about, it should be considered, not thrown away, rejected completely.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy, and thank you for your time today, Dr. Green. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, including